the ultimate tank build, in collaboration with AQUA.
Breaking down and selling a tank.
Chapter 1, the case file. I've already given away a lot of my corals and fish, and this is what I have left. Unfortunately, I just sold the LITE, so I'm hoping to sell this tank as soon as possible so the corals won't shrivel up and die. I've had 11 aquariums total, and this is my 7th saltwater aquarium. My current tank is a 150-gallon tall marine land with a custom-built stand by a company called Atypical Fish. Not sure if they're still around. One thing I loved about this tank is that you really can't hear a thing coming from it. And that is because there is nothing under the tank. We converted a coat closet behind the tank into a small filtration room. Reefer Gill said it best that a filtration room is like a man cave for aquarium hobbyists, and I completely agree. It is made up of a 3-tier system: quarantine tank, refugium, and sump. The quarantine tank was my first line of defense against unwanted pests in my tank. I would quarantine new fish for 1 to 2 weeks, treating them with copper. The refugium sits on the middle shelf. It's home to macroalgae and copepods. The sump sits on the bottom level. It's home to a Reef Octopus 150, a 2 Little Fishies 150 reactor for phosphate control, and a 2 Little Fishies 300 reactor to dose magnesium. I also run a DIY carbon reactor made out of a water filter. The canister filter is also filled with carbon and has got me out of some big jams. The whole system is run by a Blue Line pump NH50PX. Chapter 2, getting ready for the buyer. This mission is simple: clean the tank for the new owner. Some people sell used tanks in terrible condition. When I sell a tank, I like to make it look good for the new buyer. My travel schedule has caused me to neglect the glass on my tank, and now coralline algae is growing on the front glass. It has gotten pretty thick. I use a Continuum Aqua Blade scraper, not a sponsor. I also use the JW Pet Company algae scraper, also not a sponsor. And while the JW does a good job on a light buildup of algae on the glass, its flexible body takes some of the power away when you're tackling a big job like this. The Continuum Aqua Blade cuts through the coralline algae, of course with a lot of elbow grease. This is also the perfect time to do a quick review of a product I picked up at MACD in 2014. Okay, so the acrylic clear universal algae pads, also not a sponsor again, but according to Aquarium Designs, who makes the pads, they can be used both on glass and acrylic and rip through coralline algae. Let's put this to the test. The way these algae pads work is you attach these Velcro pads to your scraper, and then you attach the algae pads. Here we go. Okay, I'm applying some really good pressure, but this pad does not seem to be able to put a dent in this coralline algae. As I said, this coralline algae is pretty thick. Let's see if these algae pads will work on algae that you would normally see if you're keeping up with your weekly maintenance. Okay, for this type of buildup, these algae pads seem to work very well. I would definitely use these for my weekly cleanings, but not for heavy duty jobs. Okay, back to getting rid of this coralline algae. The tank is looking much better. Time to find a buyer. Chapter 3, finding a buyer. I wanted to give someone a great deal. I'm selling my tank with almost all the equipment. It's all worth over $3,000. I'm going to sell everything for $400. This should definitely be a blessing to someone. Now that the tank is clean, I will take lots of pics. I'm a sponsor of my local club, so I will make a thread listing my tank for sale. I will make sure I include everything I'm interested in selling. The last thing I want is an unhappy buyer. The second place I post an ad for my tank is on Craigslist. Personally, when I post on Craigslist, I do not include any of my personal information. The buyer I chose is a college student from my local club studying marine biology. So I know he would take good care of my tank and would really appreciate this deal. With the tank now sold, it's time to break down the tank. When I break down a tank, I like to have a plan. My plan is different depending on if I am keeping the tank or giving it away. I still have livestock, so I needed to consider how far my tank inhabitants will be traveling. I suggested to the buyer that he bring an aerator to put in the bucket that will be transporting the fish. In a perfect world, I would prefer to catch the fish first. But if I miss, this may stress them out, and I want them to be in good shape for their new trip. You know, we're gonna have to throw all the rock out first. So I slowly removed the rock from the tank, just to make sure I don't mistakenly crush the fish. I always have to remember to drain the overflow before I disconnect the pipes. I still keep a bucket handy to drain the remaining water out of the hoses. We are going to try to keep as much water as possible since he is keeping my livestock. This tank weighs over 300 pounds empty, so I made sure to ask the buyer to bring some extra muscle. In most cases, if I have room, I like to pack the aquarium and stand last. That way, it is the first thing you can put up when you get to your new location. If you pack it first, then you have to unpack all the equipment and possibly furniture if you're moving your whole house before you can get your tank, which means your livestock is spending more time out of the water. With my old tank gone, I can now start planning for my new build. Join me next week as we head to Orlando to go and pick up my new tank.
Saving little by little and putting things together, as you guys might know.
So this is my tank?
That's your tank, Thomas.
Oh, this is my tank. Nice. The ultimate tank build in collaboration with AQUA.